Chapter 6: Tax Troubles. Ingvar's dream was for his children to inherit the business, but Sweden's inheritance taxes were extremely high. So instead, Ingvar hired an army of lawyers from all over the world. Their mission was to make IKEA independent of any single country, and protected from any harmful outsiders trying to take it over. It took IKEA's lawyers more than 7 years of making shell companies, foundations and trusts in every tax haven in the world, but in the end IKEA's corporate structure became an impenetrable and untaxable labyrinth. The original IKEA company became owned by a holding company whose profits are moved to a tax-exempt non-profit, who later indirectly moves its money into the Stichting INGKA Foundation, which is based in the Netherlands. Completely apart from this is a trust, which owns a Dutch holding company, which owns another holding company in Luxembourg, which owns IKEA's intellectual property. If you're thinking this all sounds very confusing, you're right, and that's a just grossly oversimplified version. The point is that IKEA's complicated structure has led to controversy, with many accusing the company of reorganizing itself in order to avoid paying taxes. Today, 50 years after this restructuring took place, the foundation Ingvar created is technically the fourth largest charity in the world. But either way, in the time it took IKEA to become a tax-exempt Dutch charity, Ingvar was busy replicating the success in his first stores across the rest of the world, and perfecting the formula even more each time. By the end of the 70s, there were more than 20 new IKEA stores in countries like Canada, Switzerland and Australia, and Ingvar's plans for the 80s were even more ambitious. However, Ingvar wasn't prepared for what was coming next. The dark shadow of his past was catching up to him, and it would launch him into the biggest controversies of his life. Save money on every delivery you send. During the 80s, IKEA was growing at its fastest rate ever. Chapter 7: The Ghost of the Past. But Ingvar still saw everyone involved in the company as family. He was famous for meeting employees with a big bear hug, getting to know as many of them as he could, and all around being loved by everybody. However, not many people outside of IKEA personally knew Ingvar. He was just the owner of some giant Swedish furniture company, so when a journalist discovered that Ingvar had been an avid Nazi enthusiast in his youth, his entire reputation was at stake. In 1994, the journalist reached out to Ingvar for a comment, to which Ingvar wrote back saying he was willing to talk openly about everything. After all, Ingvar was indoctrinated into Nazi ideology through his grandmother when he was too young to think independently. Now that the terrible reality of the Third Reich was public information, he had changed his views completely. So, Ingvar thought that by being totally transparent about everything, any controversy would go away once people heard his story. However, the journalist had come across 2 documents alleging that Ingvar had attended a fascist meeting as late as 1958. At that point, World War II had been over for over a decade, and Ingvar was 32 years old. This was no longer a story about an innocent boy who had been indoctrinated by his family. It was a story about a mature businessman who might just be an active Nazi, and when the story broke out, newspapers in all of Europe circulated the rumor. IKEA went into crisis mode, and demanded answers from its founder. Ingvar wrote an open letter to everyone, openly explaining the story of his indoctrination, his involvement with the Swedish Nazi Party, expressing his regrets, and begging for everyone's forgiveness. As for the accusation that he was an active Nazi, Ingvar disproved it by saying that 1958, the year of the alleged meeting, had been the year when IKEA's first store was being heavily renovated. He was simply too busy with work to worry about politics. In fact, Ingvar had not attended any such meeting, and despite the news fiasco this initial story caused, Ingvar had done one thing correctly. He was honest about everything, and when people heard his version of the story, the controversy died down. At least, that was until 1998. This time, another news story broke out, alleging that Ingvar had financed the start of IKEA by borrowing Nazi money. Again, another barrage of headlines rolled out in the newspapers, but Ingvar didn't really care about the claim that he had borrowed money from Nazis. He was furious that anyone thought he had borrowed money at all. In his words, "They could have accused me of murder, but not of borrowing money." In the entire lifespan of IKEA, Ingvar had never taken out a loan, so the claim was totally false. This time though, IKEA's employees didn't demand answers. Instead they offered their full support for Ingvar, and he was so grateful that he broke down in tears. However, rumors of Ingvar's involvement with the Nazis never completely went away. For example, throughout his life he had remained acquainted with a Swedish Nazi activist and Holocaust denier, and Ingvar even invited him to his wedding and called him a great man. It's also known that in the 80s, some of IKEA's suppliers in East Germany were using forced labor, and it's very likely that IKEA's executives were aware of it and did nothing to intervene. But either way, despite the controversies surrounding Ingvar's past, IKEA was on its way to conquering the world. Throughout the 90s, IKEA built more than 70 new megastores and became one of the world's strongest brands. And in 2008, IKEA took the throne as the world's largest furniture retailer. IKEA's success, and the fact the company had remained private, meant Ingvar became one of the richest people in the world. And yet he still maintained his frugal lifestyle. He lived in the same house, drove the same old Volvo for 20 years and always flew economy. Ingvar passed away at 91 years old in 2018. Today IKEA has well over 450 locations, and so it's not surprising that some crazy stories have happened at IKEA stores. There's a few troubling ones, like when a 12-year-old boy ran away from home and got lost in an IKEA for 6 days. But there's also some heartwarming stories too. Like a couple who met for the first time at their local IKEA and decided to have their wedding there as well. Whatever you think of IKEA, there's no denying that it's one of the most fascinating companies around. They've sparked several important retail innovations that other companies around the world now use.